All right, and welcome once again to White Lotus of Light conversational series. And I am thrilled and excited to have Versan Aljarrah, I hope I said your last name right, from Black Swan Capitalist. Versan is just amazing, and I have been really diving into the world of crypto and sort of the Internet of Value, this future system that's being rolled out financially, which to me, you know, on this channel, obviously we talk primarily on spiritual, esoteric, alternative history. But one of the manifestations of the spiritual war I often talk about is what's happening in the financial system. And it's something that impacts all of us. And I believe on this channel that everyone shouldn't just be trying to figure out how to survive this difficult change that society and the economy is going through, but instead how to thrive. And so I brought Versan on today to give an eagle-eye view of what's happening in the economy currently, the new system that seems on deck, and then finally we're going to discuss like some strategies that we can take as individuals to help kind of weather the storm. And so, Versan, how you doing today, brother? Just to start out with.
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, well, fantastic. And so just for my viewers, I've actually mentioned Versan and Vandel, his brother Vandel wasn't able to make it today, on Black Swan Capitalist. And the reason for that is that I find Versan has just incredible vision. Like, he really sees the system. I'm going to have him discuss his background here in a minute. But he really sees things in a systemic way. And he's very shrewd and bordering on cynical, which I think is the correct lens when you look at socioeconomics or politics and economics. And he even, you know, he has his own views on what's going on spiritually and the hidden hand behind things. And we're not going to touch on that a lot today. But one of the things I appreciated about Versan is he's clearly very open-minded while still being discerning. Like he's grounded in his understanding of those hidden forces. And so that was a fairly unique blend. I also find their show to have like absolutely exquisite production value, and just their guests are top shelf. You had a recent interview. What was the name of that gentleman, the bald guy with kind of yellow tinted glasses, who was English and talked a mile a minute, and you guys couldn't even get a word into edgewise? Everything he said was gold, though, pretty much. What was that gentleman's
name? It was worth it. His name is Francis Hunt. He's a remarkable person.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And so that's a great interview. That's just an example of the like incredibly high quality guests that Black Swan Capitalist has. And so if you're interested in finance at all, and especially crypto, which we're going to get into here, I highly recommend definitely give a follow, subscribe to Versan and Vandel. And they do offer sort of guidance and coaching around this. And so that's something we can talk about more at the end of the show. I'm going to have all of Versan's information in the description, and so you can just go ahead and click on that. And so, Versan, can you just tell us a little bit about your background, your educational background, and I believe mechanical engineering, and what led you to finance?
Sure. So yes, my original background was mechanical engineering. I graduated from college, went into mechanical engineering, got a job off down, opened up my own business. And in 2018 is when I first started my, research into cryptocurrencies, blockchain-based solutions, and digital assets, all of that. And I realized that we were living through a heist on a global scale by the central banks. And that's when I said, okay, I'm in the wrong business. I need to get into this. And to speak freely, the money is far more attractive. In finance, you want to make money, you got to be around money, right? So that's really where the journey began. It took us, my brother, 10 days to really dig into this. And that's really when we understood what was really going on here and what was happening behind closed doors. And that's really how our journey started. And I got to tell you, man, the deeper you go into this, the more clear this picture becomes of what is transitioning and, of course, how you can position yourself to be successful in this transition. And, it's not going to be easy, but there are ways to position yourself now. So when this wealth transfer takes place into these blockchain-based solutions, that you can be part of that wealth transfer and not subject to a central bank digital currency. That's really our goal here, is to make sure that people understand how to do this, and we teach people how to do this. So
yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so Versan, so I've talked a lot about on this channel that there was an imminent financial collapse coming, and that it's, from my perspective, it seems to me that it's engineered, much like a certain building that was not hit by a plane on a September day, 22 years ago. That building seems to have been brought down by place charges and a controlled demolition. And I see a very similar pattern here of the raising of interest rates. Now we have an inversion in the yield curve, which maybe you can talk about that a little bit. And now I see a lot of pressure being put on small and regional banks to collapse them and consolidate that. And I wonder, how things are going to play out, given that there's rumors of this Operation Sandman. Have you heard of that, with the de-dollarization, right? So I'm just curious, could you give us the eagle-eye view on kind of what you're seeing as the major flashpoints and warning signs that the traditional economy is in bad shape?
Sure. Yeah. Let's look at this from a macro perspective. I think that's the best way to do it, and then we can dive in deeper into the details.
Sure.
We have to, first of all, shed some light on a grave and unsettling truth. That truth is that we are seeing a crisis of immense proportions, and basically this insidious weaponization of power by our government. That's really where it begins. We see an unholy alliance between the FBI, the CIA, the food industry, and the financial industry. And the corruption that is really tainting the United States it goes all the way up to the top. And our president, basically the one who's supposed to be this beacon of hope and integrity, is actually being linked to this disturbing web of deceit. Today's news, by the way, was what's her name? Marjorie
Taylor Greene.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't get her name right, but she actually came out this morning with articles of impeachment, and she's now pushing for the impeachment of Biden. Now, we heard from the back end that something like this was going to play out. And so what we're seeing right now is the weaponization of this power through the government and the financial industry. Of course, that's the core of this, because it keeps us in line. It's eroding the democracy, and it's destroying the trust in all the institutions that we have, and it's undermining everything that we hold value and dear. So this kind of now ties into the banking crisis. We're going to talk about that. Right. First of all, we need to analyze, how does currency get destroyed? When people say the destruction of currency, what does that mean? Well, essentially, we're looking at the currency. $1 can buy you, a lighter, for instance. Now, $1 can't buy you a lighter. So basically, your purchasing power is being lost. How does this happen? The destruction of currency happens through debt. All right. And what is a central bank's power? Where do they get their power from? It's their power to issue debt. The dollar is a unit of debt, and that's why it's the world reserve currency. The world uses the dollar as debt, as an instrument. However, this is what's causing the destruction of it, because it's creating inflation, because we keep issuing debt, debt-based system. When that inflation is there, the confidence in the dollar is lost. And that's why there's a demand for new technologies to basically rethink. Governments are rethinking a new sustainable monetary supply. And that's really where we, at the crux of this intersection between the traditional banking system and the new banking system that is being built. So when we analyze this, we look at closely, and what do we see? We see that the Federal Reserve, and not just our Federal Reserve, our central banks around the world are coordinating, and they're actively involved in dethroning fiat currencies. They are looking for an exit strategy out of fiat currency. Why? Fiat, cash. Because they cannot monitor, they can't track it, they can't tax it. And that's also why they are discreetly funneling billions and billions of dollars into these new blockchain-based solutions, so they can basically track everything. And another thing I want to clarify is that when we talk about cryptocurrency, blockchain. People need to understand what is cryptocurrency really. It's really cryptocurrencies have no intrinsic value. People need to understand that. It's the underlying technology that's being built onto the traditional payment rails already in our banking system. And that is really where we see this wealth transfer too. We're bridging the traditional banking system with this new banking system where everything is going to be tokenized. And yes, we are going digital. They are going to wipe out cash. But you know, basically the underlying problem here as a result of all of this, what we just talked about, is that global credit markets are drying up. Liquidity is drying up. What is liquidity? It's really just having cash on hand, in a sense, having money on hand so you can quickly go buy something or do something. So that makes borrowing money and lending money very difficult. And this is where we see that systemic risk that's going to result in a lockup of the global financial system at some point. We're not there yet. And that's where this debt crisis conversation, the default, what we're hearing about, is it comes into this in the center of this, but we can break that down here in a bit. Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. So I just wanted to clarify real quick. I don't think they're getting rid of fiat. I think they're getting rid of cash, which happens to be modern cash is fiat currency. I just want to make that little distinction for viewers. I knew what you meant, but fiat just simply means they're going to print on demand without it being backed. I mean, it's possible that they will have some kind of backing at some point, or pegging or something. I mean, the Chinese and Russians have already done this, or the Russians, I guess, most famously, with they sort of pseudo-backed the ruble, and like 2 grams of gold equals 1 barrel of oil, like a pseudo peg there. But I think what you meant is they just want to get rid of cash. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. They want to get rid of cash in favor of like some form of digital currency for tracking, et cetera, purposes. And of course, the group that I call the Molochians, right, or the Venetian Black Nobility, they seem to want to have a you know, the CDBC system with programmable money to where it can like decrease in value, or you can only buy 2 pounds of hamburger, maybe if you're lucky, per week, or whatever nonsense they want to put in their control measures. They can even up to and including pull a Justin Trudeau with the truckers and just go deep and turn the switch off to where your wallet no longer works. And so that's clearly, to me, like the goal is something in that realm. But you were, just to clarify, you're saying they want to get rid of physical cash. Was that correct? That was that point you were making when you said fiat?
Yes, they're trying to get rid of physical cash.
Fantastic. Yeah, because they're definitely still going to, I think, be printing based primarily by fiat, meaning like without any kind of intrinsic backing. Although we do see what appears to be, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, a plan to deal with the debts. I mean, one way they have out is a very strong upward revaluation of gold, and then they can do a little accounting trick and say that the new gold valued at a higher rate wipes out the debts on the rest of the books. What are your thoughts about gold revaluation? Do you see like even a brief return to a gold standard or a soft peg or anything like that? Or do you think they'll just do that accounting trick and move right back to fiat CDBCs and maybe have something else for elite transfer? That's one of the things I see emerging, is I see a 2-tiered system of it. Looks like they're trying to create an elite clearinghouse and then a consumer level thing, which will have all the nasty CDBCs and whatnot. What are your thoughts on those 2 points? The gold revaluation, then a 2-tiered system.
Okay, so first of all, let's again look at this from a macro perspective. We certainly see the central banks positioning themselves for some sort of monetary reset. Right? We're already seeing these massive changes in the world of finance, and beautifully, Ripple is going to be in the center of all of this. They're building this bridge again between the legacy and banking system and the new financial system using a digital asset called XRP. But when we look at this new system, this can unfold in a few ways. Okay, so the way I see it, let's talk about a gold backing or a gold peg, right? I believe this is still possible, and I've been called names for this, and I really don't care. The truth is, when we hear these people calling me names, I'm looking at them, and their channel is only addressing one side of the story. No wonder they don't have another perspective on this, because they're not addressing the financial side. And this is what my brother and I do. We bridge the two. So people can actually see the bigger picture. Nobody else is doing that. And I find that very problematic, because you're not giving people the full story. So when we look at this from our perspective, for instance, with also, not to mention, we're seeing many states in the United States already publicly talking about bringing back gold and silver as legal tender. Okay, it's 2023. You really think I'm going to go to the store with a piece of gold and say, hey, take a piece of that so I can buy a loaf of bread? No. And I'll explain that. When we look at digital assets, blockchain technology essentially can certainly be pegged or represent, which is like backed, a physical commodity such as gold and silver, using technologies like XRP and like XLM, Ripple and Stellar, through a process known as tokenization. All these YouTubers talk about tokenization, yet they don't. Okay, if you can tokenize it, then yes. Tokenization involves creating a digital token, basically, on a blockchain network that is basically backed and represented by the value of a real physical asset like gold and silver. So yes, I do see that easily. And another thing, the Bank of International Settlements, they have reclassified precious metals from a tier 3 asset class to a tier 1 asset class, which is zero risk. And now we've heard this a lot. People keep repeating this now. Well, what does that mean? It means that they are, again, positioning themselves for a monetary reset. Are we going back to gold and commodities? Absolutely. I strongly believe this. And the reason I say this is because we look at the current challenges in the financial system. And in order for this to transition, something needs to happen. A crisis big enough needs to trigger this, which would eventually implode the debt market, which would have a domino effect into the stock market, the derivatives market. And let me explain, the derivatives market is the biggest, excuse my language, biggest fucking joke on the planet, because the derivatives market has more than $15-16 trillion just from JP Morgan alone in derivatives exposure. There's not even enough physical gold on the planet to meet that, basically. What I'm trying to say is that when this domino effect happens, as a result, whether we default or whether the dollar loses its reserve status to a level playing field, all that money, it's not going to vanish. It moves from one set of assets into another. And all this money and this debt and everything we're talking about is going to be looking for the amount of physical gold on the planet to sit under it. That is going to run the price through the freaking roof, man. And again, people don't understand how this really plays out. And I'll be honest, I don't even have the answers to everything. I mean, I'm sure you know that already. What we're doing is we're analyzing the situation. We're talking to experts. We're talking to experts also on the phone, not just everything online. A lot of the stuff we talk about can't even be discussed online for security purposes and for them not to expose their identity. So we're getting a lot of inside information, and not just from the US. We're getting information from Saudi Arabia. We're getting information from Dubai. I'm getting information from Japan. So we know what's really going on here. We're not getting one side of the story. So yes, to answer your question, I can easily see some sort of gold, silver backed digital asset easily. And that would certainly bring trust and stability to the financial system. The financial system is not stable because we took it off the gold standard. That's why the currency is in the current situation. That's why we are all struggling with inflation and having to deal with these hardships. And it's not fair to everyone else, but people aren't paying attention. So
so one of the things you're talking about is this idea of Exeter's pyramid. And you see up here at the top, you got 1.6 quadrillion actually with a Q.
Look at that.
Derivatives. See? Then you have miscellaneous assets. So that's like commercial real estate, which, by the way, commercial real estate is utterly tanking right now. Securitized debts, broad currency illusions. I love that. So those are treasuries, bonds, stuff. Then you have power currency illusions. That's physical cash, which, like you say, there's definitely a war on cash. And then at the very bottom, you have power, money, gold, and silver. It's nothing. It's 4 trillion. And look at these numbers above it. I mean, this is like in order for this to match this and like balance the books, you would have to have like 1,000-fold increase, something like that in the gold and silver price. And what you're saying about just to help my folks visualize this is, as the derivatives market implodes because of the credit default swaps and interest rate sensitive derivatives, which are now all under tremendous strain because of the unrelenting increases in interest rates by the Fed, which is very intentional. To do that in this current market is just absolutely insane. You're begging for a crash. So this will liquidate eventually. And then that money will drop down here. And then that's, as I said, commercial real estate in particular is already under pressure. You better bet that residential real estate will also do that. Then you got corporate and municipal bonds. Municipal bonds in the US are a fucking joke, as you say. Like, there's no way the ones in California and Illinois in particular, in New York, are going to ever possibly like be able to, you know, pay that off. And so it just is going to collapse. But it doesn't go away. What has to happen then is these numbers have to move somewhere else, like you say, and it's going to move down here. And I would add down here, as you say, because I've done the research, XRP, XLM, and a few other cryptos. I mean, there, as I know you know, there is, and one thing my viewers probably don't know is that there is there's an SEC case against Ripple and calling the XRP token a security. And it's just utterly trumped up and false. And it seems pretty clear to me that JP Morgan went in to Ripple, tried to shake them down for some of the escrow, trying to get it for like not even probably less than a penny, tenth of a penny on the dollar kind of prices. Ripple refused. And then right after that, the case dropped, because David Schwartz, who's the chief technology officer of Ripple, has said tons of venture capitalists have come to us and tried to lean on us to sell them the escrow for cheap and to not sell them at the retail prices. They think they're entitled to it. Like, they got all these IPOs where they get, you know, the automatic 100x because they got in ultra early, and we weren't willing to give them these sweetheart deals. And so that's why you see things like the SEC case and Gary Gensler attacking them, whereas you had the exact opposite with Ethereum. With Ethereum, you had during their sort of ICO and so forth, you had what were the so-called disguised whales, people who had enormous positions, but it was hidden who they are. And that actually means that ETH is actually a lot more centralized than it appears, although we really don't have any quantification or measurement of centralization versus decentralization. It's just a nonsense talking point that they can use that has no legal standing, that they can use as a statement of why they're cracking down on these cryptos and not others. And it's to create winners and losers. However, at the same time this happened, where with the SEC case, Ripple has continued to make all these partnerships with banks around the world, like 170-something banks. And it looks as though what's going to happen is that XRP will be at the center, and there'll be the XRP ledger, and then off on each side, there'll be these side chains where the central banks do whatever nonsense, because that stuff had to be hidden. They didn't want to put it on the public blockchain. They're insidious manipulations. And so they have that all hidden. Ripple convinced them to go along with this. And then to sell from one CDBC to another, you'll have to use the either on-demand liquidity or other aspects of the XRP ledger in order to transfer one cryptocurrency to another. And so, central bank digital currency to another. So say you're in England, you're an English businessman who has a deal with someone in Korea, you're going to take your CDBC digital pound, change it to XRP, and then that'll be changed into the Korean won. So one of the things that I wonder about is, I've shown this image before. So Adam Smith tells us that capitalism abhors fetters. It doesn't like any kind of friction. And anytime there's friction and there's a way that you can get around that friction point, capital is going to, much like water, naturally go to where there's less friction. And so this is a visualization showing like these various different like CDBCs, and then XRP is at the center. And I pointed out, and you don't need to agree with this, Versan, and I won't get you in trouble for this, but I saw that this shape, with you put XRP at the center with all these CDBCs, it looks almost exactly like the coronavirus. And what's interesting is that Luc Montagnier, the Nobel Prize winning virologist, he said that the spikes on the coronavirus were artificially placed there, and over time, with a CRISPR, over time these would fall off and it would become much less deadly, and it would just be essentially a very contagious cold. And he said that back in March of 2022, and almost nobody heard that. And so what I think is going to happen is I think you're going to start seeing various business people interact directly in XRP rather than changing through the two different CDBC systems. And because of that, what I think will happen is I think that this will end up being a much more libertarian system, as people either use direct peer-to-peer or otherwise operate solely and directly in XRP rather than the CDBCs at the business level. And when that happens, that's going to cause the CDBCs to become shaky, and I think they're even going to fall away because people on the ground don't want them. And if people at the higher level aren't using them because business can transact more swiftly and cleanly by staying just in XRP, I think that it may very well be that we end up just using XRP and XLM directly and just cut the CDBCs out at some point. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that in terms of, is it possible that even though it's being used by the central banks as this intermediary, that system could actually take over from the central banks and become the new financial system without the central banks? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. And I don't need for you to agree with the woo-woo stuff that I put in there, but...
No, that's okay. First of all, you are very informed. You really are. So I'm going to give you a lot of credit for that. And I encourage your viewers to continue listening to you. I really think you know your stuff, man. So, keep up the good work. Well, first of all, we need to understand the underlying asset of XRP. First of all, people need to understand that it was designed to operate and serve global markets. So in my position, I still believe that it is perfectly positioned to serve as a world reserve currency. And I'm confident that the XRP ledger is capable of handling stable coins and CBDCs for billions of people across the world. The way I see it really is that these technologies, they're here to really, again, bridge that legacy of the banking system. And this technological advancement, its groundbreaking phenomenon, is already underway, and it's promising to supposedly reshape the global financial landscape as we transition into this new digital economy that's being built on these blockchain-based solutions. So right now, what we're seeing is that the stage is still being set for this great wealth transfer. And I know you mentioned a few technologies. There are, for your listeners out there, there's XRP, XLM, XDC, Algorand, IOTA, Quant, HBAR, and Casper's one of them too. But I want people to understand that these digital assets are really targeting different niche places in the global market. So they're not competing with each other like everyone thinks. It's not competing, they're complementing each other. Right. And this is really your great reset, if you want to call it, because again, they're targeting, like XDC is targeting supply chains. And carbon credits and managing carbon based on those supply chains. So this is where those carbon footprint comes in, so a lot of weird stuff is happening too on the outside. Whether this is going to be at some sort of totalitarian regime or something else libertarian, that is yet to be seen. All right. Yeah. So what we can do is hope for the best and position ourselves accordingly until this unfolds, because we know that there are some other things happening behind closed doors. Another thing we have to clarify is that Ripple, the company, and XRP are two different things. Correct. We have to clarify that. Many people think it's the same thing. It's not. So what I'm trying to say is Ripple can be centralized if it needs to be, if they want it to be. So it's important to know who's going to be running Ripple later on down the road. And I'll be honest with you, David Schwartz, I do not trust him anymore. I discovered some things about him, and I'm still doing my due diligence, but I would take everything he says with a grain of salt. You need to do your own research on this stuff because it's out there, it's public. You just have to put the pieces together, or you can follow some very good channels out there that are really educating people on this. But how this is going to be seen is yet to be, we don't know, but it seems like that Quant, for instance, is working very closely with IBM and MIT to create the central bank digital currency system. And that is really a closed system. So I want people to also understand that CBDCs are closed. XRP is, again, a bridge currency. So it's going to make these central bank digital currencies interoperable. It's really a bridge. That's about it. You know, how this is going to unfold, I still don't know. But what I keep telling people is to invest in the technologies that are building these solutions. So you might not have to be subject to a CBDC. That's the way I see it. Because if you look at the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, who's working very closely with Ripple at high-level discussions on financial technology, you also discover that the World Bank has openly said this, and I have a document here. I'll email it to you when we're done with this call, from the World Bank 2021. I think it's already out there, but they made it very clear that the two stable coins are going to be XRP and XLM. And if it's a stable coin, it has to be backed or represented by something. Sounds like gold and silver. You know, it's very possible. And I've seen those funny charts before where they have like XRP and gold and and like Algorand and something else. And I don't know if that's going to be how it is. But again, if you look at this from a macro perspective, you see a clear picture. It's hard to explain it. You have to see it for yourself. I truly believe that people need to do their own due diligence. But I think this is a very exciting time to be alive. And the only thing I want to make it clear also is with the Securities Exchange Commission, people are worried about the lawsuit. They keep talking about it. Everybody talks about the lawsuit. And I keep telling people the lawsuit is going to cause some turbulence, but it will not stop the potential for XRP and its massive gains. If you look at Dubai, look at Saudi Arabia, look at Japan, and the rest of the world, they're except Eastern Europe and the West, which are like brothers in arms, by the way. They are disgusted by this woke propaganda.
Who are brothers in arms? Who did you say? Sorry, I missed that. Who are brothers in arms?
Eastern Europe and the West. Yes. They are the rest of the world, and I get information from Saudi and Dubai. They are, again, disgusted with this woke political identity crap. They are disgusted by the weaponization of the food industry, the financial industry. Whether this is globally engineered or not, I really don't know, and I hope not. But I see Dubai, and I get news from Dubai and Saudi that they are moving forward. And if you look at the macro perspective on the financial side, you see that all the money, the power, the influence, the technology is going to the East, and they're leaving the West behind. So whether this lawsuit goes this way or that way, I promise people it's a show. It's to protect incumbents who are keeping this traditional banking system intact for a reason. What news just came out today? I put it on Twitter. Deutsche Bank was linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Deutsche Bank was linked to Jeffrey Epstein after JP Morgan was linked to Jeffrey Epstein. So it's very possible that they're delaying this lawsuit because they need this banking system to be intact so they can continue to traffic. Who knows? I'm just trying to put two and two together, you know? But it doesn't matter how this lawsuit goes. Even if they declare XRP as a security, I could give a crap because the rest of the world does not see it that way. They see it as a currency, the rest of the world. So if that's the case, maybe the best thing to do is let this castle burn. And when XRP has regulation, we get the hell out of here and go to Dubai and start a new life for us, you know, because there's regulatory clarity. They don't have that woke ideology bullshit that stays here with all the other bullshit. So, you know, there's a lot of other issues to discuss that tie into everything, how this is going to unfold, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. And I really think that, despite the fact that it looks really quite scary, this great reset, talking about the one coming out of Davos, not you're talking about a reset in terms of, you know, that there's going to be a financial reset. I mean, that is absolutely inevitable at this point. It's impossible. The funny thing is that the old system was incredibly well thought out and very tight and well created, and it was created over centuries, if not millennia, of very insidious, careful, intelligent planning. And it would have been impossible, it seems, for people at the lower levels to disrupt that and change that. It was just kind of going to be that way forever. Like, that's how well built the financial system was, in terms of they kind of thought of everything in terms of control. And so there was really no way to kind of escape the horror of that system, except for we have two groups of elites, in my opinion. One group of elites who wants to keep things more or less as they've been for the past few millennia, which is to say they and their descendants are in power, their philosophy is the dominant one, and they want to kind of copy and paste it over to a new system. And that's where you get this Klaus Schwab Great Reset. There are other people who feel that they would like to see humanity advance, get off the planet, advance in technology and science, and the material well-being of people on Earth is better. But they're also just kind of like self-interested actors. And so I usually call those groups, and I know we've talked about this offline, Molochian and Luciferian in terms of their mentality. There's also this idea of, back in the time of the Renaissance, there were two competing schools of thought. One out of Venice that talked about scarcity, everything was scarce, it's a zero-sum game. The only way for me to grow in wealth is to take from you. They're very explicit about that as part of their fundamental philosophy. Then there's this competing philosophy that was coming out of Florence at the time. Oh, they also believed that humans were just a meat machine. It was just mechanical. They were dead and soulless. There was really nothing to it. So you can do whatever you want to humans. There's nothing. Just a very nihilistic, dead materialist attitude. The Florentines, by contrast, had an idea of that we were made in the image of the Creator, and we're these creative, amazing beings that are able to change and shape reality because we are a reflection of the Creator, and so we have that creative capacity. And
Amen.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And they also believed in the infinite fecundity of the universe. And as we talked about before we got online, I mean, sure, if you're a little tiny minnow and you're in the ocean, technically the ocean is finite. But for all intents and purposes, as a minnow, the ocean is infinite. And so, yeah, the universe is finite. Perhaps we don't even actually know that. But based on the theoretical modeling that we're giving, it seems that it is limited. But for all intents and purposes, as people who are, somewhere between 5 and 6 feet tall in a universe that's, quintillions or septillions of light years across, it's infinite. And it's therefore infinitely fecund. And if you look at nature, nature's just very fecund. It just keeps giving, it keeps growing. And so based on actual observation of the universe, it seems that this Florentine model is more accurate. But what is it? What are some of the things that flow from that? This side isn't going to want anything to change because changing means very likely that their slice of the pie gets smaller. It's a threat to them. It's a threat to them if new people come along and are, say, educated and might be able to outcompete with them. They don't want that. They're monopolists. They believe in top-down control. This other group believes in competition, believes in sort of what would become capitalism. I mean, this is really the seed germ for the idea of capitalism that would come, a century or two later with Adam Smith. It was all well underway in terms of the economics, but the theory of it. And they believe in improving the material well-being of humanity because they believe that things build, you gain momentum, it becomes an upward virtuous cycle. The more educated people are, the greater the outputs, the greater the technology, and just the greater improved condition. The rising tide lifts all boats. And because they believe and are confident in their ability to compete at an absolute top shelf level, they believe in excellence and meritocracy almost above all else, whereas this other group believes in nepotism and loyalty above all else, right? Loyalty to their hive mind. This group is about the individual and making strides that will impact all of humanity. And so with those two different competing models, those have never gone away. Those have continued to percolate throughout the elite's psychology all the way up through current day. And you see it. And while I don't necessarily like all the ideas of sort of the ruthless capitalist, social Darwinist kind of thing, still this model is so much better than this slavery model, which is really, when you boil it down, this is a slavery versus liberty model to some degree. This group is still quite ruthless, but you can live with them kind of thing. It's basically, the way I describe it is what I see happening. I see this Great Reset group failing. Their time has come, their model doesn't work. Nobody likes them. Everybody hates them. They, I think that they have a lot more control than they actually do. They have a tremendous amount of control in Europe in particular, and then also the British colonies. They do have a tremendous amount of control in that part of the world, but it seems to me that one of their little choir boys, the CCP, has gotten away from them. and has now become an enemy, even though I find the CCP to have that same top-down mindset. They appear to be a separate faction now from Davos and coming at them. I see Putin as more in this Florentine model, this more individuated, traditionalist, let's improve the material well-being of humanity. And so he's naturally opposed to that Davos energy. But then when you look at like the Middle East, like you're saying, Dubai, I see that capitalist mindset, that libertarian mindset is springing up in specifically the United Arab Emirates. Much of the Middle East is still under tyrannical, theocracy, but Dubai is like this hub of innovation and science and all those kind of qualities I mentioned earlier. And I see India in that same boat. And India is becoming an emergent thing. And my point with all this is it seems to me like the BRICS countries are done with that old system, and that they want a new system that's global in nature and multipolar. And that just really sounds to me like this Florentine Luciferian model that I talk about. And I believe it's going to succeed, because even the people who are under the sway of Davos, most of us don't really like it. We don't like this woke bullshit. We don't want to eat bugs and be stuck in a pod. And so the people on the ground don't want this. But I even see elites in the West starting to move away from that. And so I'm just curious, what are your thoughts? I mean, I honestly think that, yes, this Great Reset thing is terrifying, but I see the forces who are against it gaining in strength every day and pushing more and more back on that. Do you think that it's possible to have this system and have it be something more libertarian, more free? Sure, it's still going to be ruthless capitalist, but do you think it's possible that that more Florentine model can emerge from what's happening? I mean, to me, I see it as inevitable even. I don't see any chance that this slavery model works, because that's just kind of the end of the story, isn't it? That would be the end.
We have to look at everything you said there. It's very important, but let's look at this in a different viewpoint. So, all right. So I've had some very interesting conversations very discreetly, and I'm trying to, okay. We need to have an open mind about the fact that, are they intentionally trying to wake up the masses, make them aware of this totalitarian regime from the other side? So that way a revolution towards a false freedom, a false liberty, and a false awakening takes place.
Yes.
We have to be open-minded about this situation, because if you look back at history, and if you look at the rules, the rule books that go to Masonry and back to those families, if you want, rule number 14 is what I just said right there. And I'm not kidding about that. You can look that up. Rule
number 14 is what? Sorry?
What I just said is to basically create a situation where they present you with a Messiah. So everyone leans towards a false freedom, a false liberty, a false Messiah, a false awakening. And I know that sounds crazy, but we have to just be open-minded about this. What does that mean, though? Essentially, how do we break free from these shackles of corruption? And it really comes down, and it begins with each and every one of us. You and I are doing our part right now. We're doing our best to educate, inform people to seek the truth and refuse to be silenced. We have to also engage in this, but in a very peaceful and persistent way to do this. This is going to help people raise their voices, so that way we can demand accountability from our government, and the institutions. We need to understand that. Thomas Jefferson once said this, and take this to heart. He once said that when governments fear the people, there's liberty. And he said when people fear the government, there's tyranny. Look at the world right now. We're all afraid, but I mean, because of what we're seeing. That's exactly what he was talking about.
Right.
So we're seeing this happen before our eyes. And we need to support independent journalism nowadays.
Yes.
Like what we're doing here. We need more supporters for independent journalism, independent investigative journalism, because we're going to be the ones, and whistleblowers too, to uncover the truth. And those who are tirelessly fighting for justice. My hair is getting white. I'm only 29 years old. My hair is getting white, and it's because all day together I'm trying so hard to build a movement that's going to shake the foundation of this corruption and restore promise to democracy in each and every one of the listeners here.
Yeah.
And this is what we're trying to do, but we were warned about this over and over. And look what you see in the Middle East. When I was growing up, and I'd be watching the news with my parents in Saudi Arabia or in Dubai, not in Dubai, I'm sorry. I went to Egypt before, and we did this, and we would watch the news get bad. And when it happened, the military and the people and the police, they turned on the corrupt officials. They stormed the palace, and they would hang them for the world to see. They used to do that. In America, when pedophilia is being okayed and you're brainwashing children into pornography at like 7 years old, that's satanic ritual abuse, by the way. People don't talk enough about this, and I'm not going to say any more about it. But when we're okaying this and parents are like, oh, this is wrong, share, retweet, that's not enough. We need people to raise their voice. We need people to stand up and fight for what's right. That's the only way we're going to get out of this, in my opinion. I think we need a revolution of some sort, but a peaceful one. But if they're going to fight fire, we have to fight fire with fire. And I'm not kidding about that. And I'm not encouraging people to go do something stupid out there. Just we have to create communities because what we're being told and what we're being fed from this way or that way, this could be a major psyop. We don't know because these people have power like you wouldn't believe. They have technology. Sure, you know of Looking Glass. You ever heard of that before? Project Looking Glass. So, God knows what's happening with that, but that was real. A former MI6 agent told me that.
Yeah, so, you heard about the final thing though, to where that they when they looked far enough forward. This is back in the early 2000s or late 90s. When they looked far enough forward, there was a bottleneck moment, an event that they couldn't alter no matter how hard they tried, no matter how many different ways they gamed it. I believe that event is the end of the Kali Yuga, which is coming up here in 2025, and just everything seems to be lining up for 2025. If you look, the ISO 222 and the new financial system and the total switchover from SWIFT into this new system has to happen, according to the BIS, by January 1st of 2025. The funding for COVID-19 at the World Bank ends March 31st, Q1, 2025.
See? Yeah.
I don't think that stuff is an accident. And the fact that I found out both those pieces of information that I just mentioned, which are factual, and you can research them and find out that both of them are valid. And I'll put up a picture of at least one of those things here. I'm having trouble tracking down that World Bank COVID-19 funding document. But I'll see. I might put a picture in if I can find it. But the other one, the BIS one for January 1st, 2025, I'm absolutely certain of. And I found Bibhu Dev Misra, his work on, he's an Indian scholar, his work on the Yuga cycles. And he said, and I found this back in 2018, 2019, he said the Kali Yuga ends 2025. And I further refined that, and it seems to be it's March 21st, 2025. When that ends, it seems that this old system just can't help but go away. Just natural law won't support it anymore. I don't think that means that people should be passive. Quite the opposite. I think that us making an intentional effort to shift where things are going is how that happens. And so there's a certain inevitability to it, and take comfort in it.
Excuse me. But
that inevitability only happens because we all take correct action. And on that note, I mean, I would love to have you and your brother back, but I want to be conscious of your time. Versan, you've been so generous, and I know you're very busy. So I wanted to ask you a little final question here, and then I'll let you go. And then I definitely want you back. What would you say to people are some financial moves that that they could make in order to protect themselves and their family? I always tell people the first thing is, like you mentioned, there's been some attacks on the supply chain and the food systems. And so food, water, medicine, standard stuff that, like, you know, even FEMA or like disaster relief groups will say you should have a couple of months of food, blah, blah, blah. I always tell people to get that stuff and the means to protect yourself if that vibes with you first and foremost. But I'm talking now financially. Once people have gotten out of cities, if possible, and taken some of those practical physical steps, and you have excess funds, what do you think is a correct allocation of investment tier funds, you know, once you've taken care of those things I just mentioned? What are your
Okay.
what are your thoughts?
I'm gonna be very transparent with your audience, and
Yeah.
they need to take this to heart.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, people need to understand how this system unfolds is basically when the dollar loses value and confidence is lost, you're going to see a skyrocketing prices in precious metals. So first of all, the ultimate currency, even with digital money, I don't care, is still gold and silver.
Absolutely.
Okay. Gold and silver has been money for thousands and thousands of years, and it will always be there as money and a store of value. It's to preserve your wealth. So don't let $20,000 sitting under the mattress. If you're out there with 20 grand in your mattress, that's very stupid. You need to put it into gold because it's going to preserve its wealth while your purchasing power is getting eaten away because of central banks printing money. So that's one, precious metals. Two, you need to get food, water, all right? But more importantly, depending where you live, and I'm not kidding about this, you need to own weapons. You need to have, because this could get ugly very fast, because what's happening is that they are doing a global engineered crisis, one after the other. That's what I talked about in the beginning, the weaponization of everything. Create a crisis bad enough to where the people are desperate and they need that solution. They create a problem and they offer a solution. These are classic CIA tactics, and that's exactly what we're seeing right now if you look even closer at the banking system. So they are here. We're living through a heist like you wouldn't believe. So that way they can come to you and say, hey, we have a solution. They might shine the name universal basic income. Sounds beautiful, sounds wonderful, but no, it's programmable money. That way they can control your emotions, your beliefs. And people are like, what the hell does that mean? Well, hey, if you vote for Biden, I'm sorry, for Trump, and they wanted you to vote for Biden, a satanic puppet, they are going to restrict your funds. Now you can't pay your bills. You're on the street. You're homeless overnight like that. So they can control the narrative. So now your family member is going to be like, well, I don't feel good about Biden, but I'm not going to say anything. Silence. You see what I mean? So that's essentially the situation we're in. So the best way to fight these central banks on a personal level for everybody is to devalue the dollar, get de-dollarize, get out of dollars. Don't let the central banks have their power. Try not to rely on the debt. Try to get out of debt because you're essentially a slave to the system. So those are some things you can do. Learn skill sets, learn how to become self-dependent. That's what we're trying to do here. So
So, one thing I want to say to viewers is that Versan and I spoke before we came online a bit about there's the classic story of during the Battle of Waterloo, the Rothschilds, one of the ways they rose to such power financially is that they had like the best information networks of anyone. They had carrier pigeons, all this kind of stuff, and so Lord Rothschild, I forget who it was. I want to say Nathan Rothschild, but I can't remember what his name was. But he was the basically the wealthiest Rothschild in Britain. He got word that oh gosh, I can't think. It's the guy who oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. The guy who beat Napoleon. Oh, well, anyways, they found out that that guy had won. The guy who beat Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo, whose name is escaping me. He knew that he had won, but he told everyone that, and that's okay. We'll end here in just a second, Versan, so it'll be fine.
you're good. You're good.
So they told everyone that actually Napoleon had won and that he was marching on London. And Rothschild went very publicly and sold a bunch of his stocks himself. He went out, not an agent himself, and went on the floor of the London Stock Exchange and sold a bunch of stocks. He had a bunch of agents around there, and that caused a panic. Everyone was filled with fear, and so everyone sold their assets. And Rothschild had all these agents in the crowd that bought up those assets for pennies on the dollar.
Right there. Yeah.
Right there, because he knew that, it's Wellington. He knew that Wellington had won at the Battle of Waterloo. And but he told everyone Napoleon had won. He lied and he made a big show about, oh, this is so terrible, I got to sell my stocks. And everyone panic sold, and then he bought everything up for pennies on the dollar.
Yes.
Go ahead.
There's something very important I need to share real quick. I've done a lot of research in the Rothschild family. I want people to understand that this really does tie back to the Rothschilds family. They were actually the ones who funded and financed both sides of the war. And by the way, the Rothschilds is a Jewish family, and I do want to say this live, and I'm going to. They actually are the ones who financed the Holocaust, killing their own people to convince the world that never again anti-Semitism will happen. Basically, that's how they got away with all these fallacies. They also did the same thing to the stock market here in the United States in 1929, and they infiltrated this country through the Jesuit order. Abraham Lincoln warned us about the Jesuit order. Thomas Jefferson warned about Jesuits. So they've been infiltrating and perpetrating all the way to the top of the presidency, and that's where we are today, by the way. So let's just pray that this cabal banking family is put in the ground where they belong. It's very disgusting people.
Yeah, you know, people who watch this channel will know that I see the Rothschilds as Johnny-come-lately frontmen to the much older Venetian banking families who began to use these Jewish families. But you're absolutely right that Rothschild and the Balfour Declaration helped get the U.S. into World War I on the side of the British, who were getting their ass kicked by the Germans at the time. Yeah, I mean, those holes go super, super deep. But my point there was that fear was used to get people to shake them out of the market and get them running into their, 1801.
Same thing with XRP, man. Same thing with XRP. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, and that's actually right where I'm going with this. So my point is that this tactic of getting people black-pilled and afraid is a classic Molochian tactic they've been using since the dawn of time. Literally, the black nobility, they took that name. We're the black nobility. Who can stop us? You think you can stop us? We can do whatever evil we want. No one can stop us. It's inevitable. We're unstoppable. We're so evil. Like from the very beginning, the black nobility was black-pilling people and saying you can't resist us and don't even try and just give up and be demoralized. Demoralization is like their central propaganda effort that they always use. And it's literally used in military propaganda. You get the enemy soldiers to lay down their weapons, then you don't have to fight them. You just go in and grab them with your guys. So demoralization is the thing you have to fight. And I don't want my viewers of my channel to be getting to black pill mode of, oh my God, I just got to survive. Thrive. I want you to thrive. And so what I want to close this with is just a couple of questions about XRP. And I know we have to go very quickly. So XRP is this center token. They're trying to scare people out of it, shake out retail at the SEC, try and lean on Ripple to get some of that escrow for cheap. I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. A lot of the XRP is held in escrow. So there is this attempt to keep you away from it. But let me ask you a question. Why can they not use the XRP ledger? I'm just going to play evil devil's advocate here, and maybe you can answer. Why not just use the XRP ledger, and then could they use like a different token, or could they somehow like have something to replace XRP? I mean, I've seen XRP mentioned in these documents, but I'm just playing devil's advocate because I see it often on Twitter. Oh, Ripple's not actually going to let people become wealthy. People who own XRP, like, they'll be screwed, blah, blah, blah. What's your answer to that particular like line of reasoning?
I think if people do their research, they'll realize that's not true.
Right.
And I think people, if they do their research again, they'll realize how naive they've been about the situation. The people who are in this space. And yes, even like there was these are a bunch of fear, uncertainty, and doubt is the biggest driver of this market right now. Okay. And they came out with this whole Unicoin bullshit. And guess what? IMF said we had nothing to do with that. They're like, what the hell is Unicoin? We had nothing to do with that. And it went for days. I even got bad emails from people and messages. I'm like, then like 2 weeks later, those idiots realized that they had no idea what they were talking about, simply because they're not understanding and researching it. Okay. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. They're going to say a lot of things. It's all bullshit and it's not good for you. That's my response.
And so, yeah, I agree with you. And so, like, viewers, there are a ton of channels out there that do excellent work. Again, Versan and Vandal, Black Swan Capitalists are among the very, very best. I recommend, and we didn't really get into this, I think that people should have all those things. You should have water, food, medicine, means to defend yourself. And then gold and silver is your primary, like your foundational layer. But I personally, and I'm pretty sure Versan is with me on this, that if you want to have something a little speculative in there of a way to tap into this wealth transfer, gold and silver is going to protect you and may even put you in a position. It does happen periodically to where if you have enough gold and silver, you can leverage that into a much better situation. The classic apocryphal example being during the Weimar Republic, you were able to buy an entire flat of apartments in downtown Berlin at the height of the hyperinflation with a single $20 US gold coin, so they say. And so what do you think about XRP and XLM? And then we'll wrap up from there. And thank you again for your time, Versan. Yeah.
That's okay. Well, I just think XRP and XLM are going to play two massive roles, and they're crucial in this new financial system. They need each other. People think that they are competing. Again, they're not. They complement each other, despite what you hear about the fact that they had disagreements. The technology is different. I don't care. You know, I know the ins and outs of this, and I have information that goes from way at the top. And this not only from the Saudi government, you know, but also from a lot of people I've been speaking to. I've built beautiful relationships, and they've only given me breadcrumbs where I had to do my own research. And you discover that they both play a key role in this new system, and they need each other. So they function together.
So I'm going to just see. I'm going to reveal something publicly I haven't said before. I have a prediction based on this, came from the angels. Twitter is going to use XLM. Twitter is going to use XLM. That's what I think is going to happen. Elon Musk keeps talking about how they're going to do some kind of thing, and he's basically trying to turn Twitter into a WeChat type thing. I see Musk as squarely in that Luciferian Florentine camp, and people will say, but Ian, what about the new WF woman that he just put in there? And my answer to that is I'm going to do an entire episode on Elon Musk. But I will just say that is a trick. Elon Musk has to get WF guys off his back, possibly assassins off his back. And so he's putting her in for a year, would be my guess. And then he's going to pull her out at the last minute and put in a ringer, a person who's believes in liberty and free speech like him. And that's going to help Trump win the election. That's a prediction that I will share on this note. And
I like that prediction. Sounds nice.
Yeah, well, I want it to be true. We'll see what happens. So, Versan, thank you so much. I have so much more I want to talk to you about, but I know our time is super limited today. I hope you would come.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, brother. I'd love to have you and Vandell on in the future. Maybe we can do a deeper dive on some of these topics. I'd really like to talk about the internet of value, the XRPL ledger, and the tokenization of derivatives and stocks and real estate, especially. We
can focus on that next time, more technical.
Yeah, I would love that. So thank you so much for your time, Versan. And where can people find you real quick on Twitter and so forth? And then I'll put it all.
Yes. My Twitter is Versan Aljarrah. It's just my name spelled correctly. There are a lot of imposters out there. Yeah. And the best way to reach me, if you need to ever reach us, is through our website. It's safe and secure. It's interoperable. So we are blackswancapitalist.io. And yes, you can find us there, and that's the best way to reach us. We do not use WhatsApp. We do not use Telegram, because those are scammers. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, that's good. Very soon I will reach a level to where I'm going to start having imposter Ians down below. So I feel I see it on all my friends' channels. So yeah. All right. Well, Versan, thank you so much. And Black Swan Capitalists, I can't recommend these gentlemen highly enough. They're absolutely brilliant. And they really see, as you can see during this conversation, they understand the front side and the back side. And so many people are focused on a part of the front side. Versan and Vandell talk about the entire front side, and they even have an understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. And that's why I invited Versan on today. Thank you so much, Versan. It's been a pleasure.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much. We'll be talking soon.
All right.